In the modern age, we are short on time, high on stress, and we rarely get 5 to 10 minutes to ourselves. So what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna make planked salmon for you really quick. It will take a little bit of time for you to soak the cedar plank. That should be soaked for about 20 minutes. But if you can forgive me that 20-minute interlude, we're gonna do this in about 25 minutes total, and you're gonna end up with a meal that's not only beautiful to the eyes, but will really satisfy your taste buds. Are you ready? In the case of this meal, it's really about order of operations. There's gonna be a few things that are cagey, but we're gonna go through it nice and easy. We're gonna go through in the right order, and then we'll have plenty of time to do everything else, like set the table and make everything look fantastic for the meal. So the two items that are the most time consuming of this is we do have to roast the salmon in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, and the rice is gonna take between 20 and 25 minutes. So what I'm gonna suggest is, let's start with the rice, because the rice can be turned off and it'll stay hot for 20 to 30 minutes. The salmon will be what we do next. And then once we do that, once we get the salmon in and the rice is in, the very next step is just taking our time with the vegetable side dish. So we'll have plenty of time to take care of that, and then set the table properly. So we're gonna start. We have parboiled rice. There's lots of different rices. This parboiled rice is a little bit more expensive, but the reason for it is it's already been sautéed and prepped. It doesn't have to be rinsed. There's no work. You literally can start cooking with it immediately. And when it absorbs the fluid and becomes full and tender, it will actually still remain very, very individualistic in the flakes. This is the perfect rice to make a rice pilaf with. So we're gonna start by letting you know that if you're making dinner for two, what you really need is about 1.5 cups of the rice. That will be more than enough for 2 people, plus a little bit more in case you find that you're hungry and you want a little bit more. So that's 1 cup, and this is 1/2. That should be perfect for 2 people. Now, what we're gonna do, which is a little unusual, is when I showed you how to make steamed rice before, we measured the amount of moisture up to the rice. And then we went a little bit above, right? The 1-finger method. In this case, we have to build all the seasonings into the broth before we add the rice. So I have water on the side to add to increase the volume, but we're going to start with 2 cans of Swanson's chicken broth. We're gonna put it into the rice cooker. And that should actually be more than enough fluid, but we have water just in case. What we're gonna do is, to that, we're gonna add a little bit of parsley. I would say maybe a tablespoon worth. Maybe 2 tablespoons. A little bit of Italian seasoning, about half as much of that as the parsley. So in this case, about 1. We're gonna add a little bit of onion powder. That looks to be about a teaspoon. And about a same amount of garlic powder. Now, once you have that in, we're gonna give it a stir to get it so that all the seasonings are together, and then we'll add the rice. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna make sure that all the seasonings are evenly mixed in with the broth. And then before we add the rice, we're gonna add just a pinch of salt. Perfect. Now that all the seasonings are blended and they're even, we're gonna add the rice to the pot. Okay, I mismeasured a little bit. So to make sure that it comes out all right, we're going to add another 1/2 cup of rice, because that's gonna be the exact right amount. So in this case, for 2 people, I would put a cup, 1.5 cans of chicken broth. Perfect. And now we're going to press cook. We're going to stir it 3 times between now and when it's done to make sure that the herbs are continuing to blend evenly and to make sure that the rice is cooking throughout. So now we're going to make the planked salmon. This is actually very, very simple, but what you're looking at is you want to make sure that you have a 6 to 10 ounce portion of fish per person. The salmon that I've purchased, we can probably get 3 portions out of it. So we'll cut it so that it's the proper size. So you're going to take the salmon, and it's perfectly okay to have the skin on, just like this. The reason for it is with the skin down, it will actually protect the salmon from overcooking, and it'll end up with a flakier, more moist fish. So we're looking for about a 6 to 10 ounce cut. Perfect. You want to make sure that there's a little bit of moisture or a little bit of space between each piece, but that it's in contact with the board. Okay, now that we've done that, let's make the sauce. The glaze for this is very, very simple, and it's also open to interpretation. You can make it however you wish. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take about half of a concentrated orange juice container, and I'm going to use that as the base. We're going to add about 3 tablespoons of honey. We're going to grab a tablespoon of Grey Poupon. We're going to add a little bit of Italian seasoning, about a teaspoon, heaping teaspoon, a little bit of garlic salt and onion powder, about an equal amount as the Italian seasoning, and then we're going to add a little bit of pepper. Now that all of that is mixed or added, we're going to blend it until it's a nice even. And what you're going to end up with is something that looks about the texture of a rich sauce. Okay, it's perfectly okay to go with what we just put together, but I'd like to add 2 more spices, something a little unusual to make it personal and to make it a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of smoked paprika to the mix, about a teaspoon, and I'm going to also add a little bit of ground allspice, and for this I'm going to do about a half a teaspoon. Once it's blended evenly, then what we're going to do is we're going to paint it onto the fish in a kind of generous coat. This is actually a paintbrush that I picked up at a hardware store because I liked the way it works. If you don't have a pastry brush or a paintbrush like me, it's perfectly acceptable to just take a spoon and to brush it on with the spoon and just kind of make sure that it's nice evenly coated and a nice generous coat. Once it's coated, we're going to sprinkle it with just a little bit of parsley. If the fish is big enough that it's completely covering the plank and there's no runoff, you can put it on the plank and leave it completely be. However, if it's really close to the edge and the sauce is starting to come over, just to protect your oven from having to be cleaned, you can put it on a baking dish like this and place that directly into the oven. Now that the salmon is in the oven and it's starting to slow roast over that beautiful cedar plank, we're gonna just go over to the rice and we're gonna give it a turn to check it out to see how it's coming along with its cooking. You'll see that the rice is beginning to absorb the broth and beginning to cook. And we're just doing this to make sure that all of the herbs are given a chance to go evenly throughout. Otherwise, they'll pool at the top and then you'll have to rough mix it once it's done to get the spices and the herbs even. All right, so now that the salmon is in and the rice is bubbling away, we can start working on that vegetable side dish. We want something that has a little bit of depth, but looks more along the lines of something that you would get in a fine dining restaurant. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little bit of broccoli, a little bit of zucchini, a little bit of carrots, and a little bit of onion, and we're gonna saute them together, just to the point where they're tender. So we're gonna start by cleaning the broccoli, and we really only wanna use the florets. I know that that's a little bit of a waste, but in this case, it's your night, and we want it to be perfect. So we'll ignore the fact that we're wasting a little bit of what could be a tasty snack. You want them to be about bite-sized pieces. So we'll make it just that way. And when you're talking about dinner for two, you really only need to make 2 portions. So being that the human stomach is only about this big, undistended, what you want to do is you probably want each portion on the plate to be no more than that in size. So that's enough broccoli for 2 people. And now we're going to take some zucchini. We're going to just trim off the top and the bottom. And what I would like is I would like pieces that are beautiful to look at, but also going to be tender and melt a little bit. So we're going to cut on the bias a little bit. We want them to be big enough that when they're cooked down, they're a bite sized, but not so big or so thick that they're gonna take over the dish. And that should be more than enough of the zucchini. For the carrots, I'm gonna say about the same. We want them to look good. We want them to be able to be seen and enjoyed, but we don't want them so big that they're gonna overpower the dish. So now we're just gonna take an onion and we're gonna wedge it a little bit, very, very thinly, so that they almost melt into the dish. Once we have these done, what we're gonna do is we're gonna quick saute them with a little bit of butter and a little bit of seasoning so that they're about 75% done. And then right before we go to serve the dish, we'll finish it so that they're hot and just perfect. What we're gonna do now though, is we are gonna turn the rice one more time. The rice is almost done. It's just gonna bake off a little bit more of the moisture and then it'll be perfect. So what we're doing is we're just moving it around a little bit to make sure that the herbs are blended throughout. This is more of a visual situation than trying to make sure that the flavors are throughout, because the flavors were mixed evenly before we put the rice in. We've pulled the salmon out. It's roasting beautifully, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna rebaste it with just a little bit more of the sauce. This will keep it moist, but it also build in more flavor. And now we're going to do something a little bit different for the sake of art. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of fresh lime And I'm going to put just a wheel or two over the top very, very thinly so that it bakes in so that it looks beautiful. It's been basted the second time, and we're going to add just a little bit of fresh lime. We're going to cut it really, really thin. And now we're going to put it in for the final baking. So now we're going to start the vegetables. Now this is a little bit more complex than just putting the vegetables in the pan with a little bit of oil and calling it a day. What we're going to do is we're going to start by coating the pan with a little bit of oil. Any vegetable oil will be just fine. I would say about maybe a tablespoon, maybe 2. You literally just want to coat the pan. That's just to protect the pan and to give it something to interact with the vegetables with. The vegetables have different cooking times. So the ones that are the most fibrous, which are the carrots and the broccoli, we're going to put in right away. And we're going to let them saute for about 3 minutes or 4 minutes and just coat them with the oil to allow them to get coated and start cooking all the way through. We just want them to get to tender. The onions and the zucchini only take a few moments and will become tender almost instantaneously. Now the magic happens. We can add the rest of the vegetables in, let them medley together. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually add a pat or 2 of butter, and we're going to sprinkle them with fresh herbs. So you want about maybe 3 tablespoons of butter. And you're going to whisk the butter to the bottom so that it begins to melt. Making sure that the vegetables are coated well. And now we're going to add just a touch, just a light sprinkle of Italian seasoning. These herbs have a very strong flavor, so you want to go light and easy. A light sprinkling of salt. And just a touch of cracked black pepper. Make sure that you're mixing it to get all the herbs and seasonings evenly mixed throughout the dish. And then we're going to put it to the side and wait until the rest of the meal is complete. Everything looks fantastic, everything is hot, and what we're going to do now is we're going to plate it up as pretty as possible, then we'll set the table and we'll pour the wine. So we're going to start by putting a little bit of veg down. We're going to put a little bit of the rice pilaf on the plate. And I'm using a large ice cream scoop because it tends to plate beautifully. So you get a nice little mound of perfectly shaped rice. And then we're gonna plate the salmon just perfectly. And we're ready to start setting the table. So the places are set and we're ready to go into dinner. And we've got a beautiful planked salmon with rice pilaf and fresh sautéed vegetables. And to pair, we have a beautiful Pinot Noir. The entire meal per portion cost is about $7 to $9 per person. The wine is a total of $9.50. It's the Ménage à Trois Pinot Noir Luscious, and it will go perfect with this meal. I think you'll find that making a romantic dinner for two can be done in the comfort of your own home at an incredible savings. And it means a little bit more when you make it yourself. So we'll open up the bottle of wine, we'll pour the glasses, and we want you to enjoy your romantic dinner for two for $35 or less. Thank you for coming to Fresh Food Therapy, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.